You know, when I was at WCB, when I first started, when I get out of school, they had a fantastic clinic in Richmond that was rated as one of the best clinics in North America. And my boss at the time, Glenn Page, hired me immediately after my last placement. But he was also flexible with my schedule that I left within a month of working there to travel with the national team. And then held off hiring me full-time for another few months so that I could travel to the World Cup with the Canadian Under-16 team. You need to be able to put in a lot of time with teams. You need to be committed to those teams, and you have to learn a bit about those sports. And if you don't have an understanding of how sport works, both on the political side, but obviously on the physical side and what the physical demands of that sport are, you're not going to be very successful. I joined fencing in 1997. I was working at the World Student Games in Sicily, Italy, and they matched me with fencing. And I'd never been with the fencing team before. But I talked to the coach, talked to some of the athletes, and I got to know them pretty well. And over the next 4 or 5 years, I actually became one of their lead therapists. And I covered them for the next 2 World University Games. And went to the World Championships with them. So, it's a sport where, you learn a lot. As it is right now, I see a lot of fencers in my practice because it is a unique skill set that you need for that sport. So in terms of the young therapists, volunteer your time, learn different sports, and so you become way more acceptable to the profession that or the team that you're going with. So they understand that you know their sport, you know the demands of the sport, and you can get them back to that sport. The best position to do that, and it happens with every therapist and doctor on every national team that I can think of, is you have to set up a meeting with the coaching staff and put down the guidelines that you want to work with, that you're comfortable with. I usually go with a team and I say to the coach, okay, the final decision is I will tell you who's available for selection, and then you pick who you want for that team. I'm not telling you who to pick for the team, but I'm going to tell you who's not available. And they could be out because of injury, they may be like a concussion, they may be out because they've strained their MCL, their metacarpal ligament. So they may not be available for selection. And the coaches has to agree that that is how you're going to run the team. If he is not happy with that, then I wouldn't be working for that team, because you can't have a coach decide who's going to play even if that athlete's hurt. For example, when I coach at Langara College, I'm not the therapist for that team. I do not spend a lot of time with those players on the field if they are injured. So we have a therapist that does that, and once the game is over, yes, I may look at the athlete and give my opinion on what the injury is. I may see them in the clinic, but I do not at the time of competition decide if that athlete continues or is able to play. And for that reason, that's because you lose objectivity as a coach. I want to win like every other coach. If I assess an athlete and he's my best player, I may tend to want to play him before he's really ready to play. And so I let somebody else make that decision. I just stayed out of the decision-making process. We have had incidents at major games where we've had a disagreement with a coach, but that's been handled early in the process. And once coaches understand that, especially at the national, international level, most coaches now are on board, and they understand the ramifications of playing an injured athlete, and they tend to shy away from that. But you do have to have the ground rules in place before you go away or you're involved in a competition, for sure. And I always say to new grads that they should work in an environment that they're comfortable in, and try not to be a sole therapist anywhere they go, especially in the first year or two, so that they're not working in isolation, they're working in conjunction with other therapists, other experienced therapists, that they can bounce ideas off of. And that's one of the things I like about our clinic. Like we have 8 therapists there, they all get along, and it's not unusual for us to call each other in and have a second look at somebody's knee or neck or that kind of thing and get another opinion. And so working in isolation is hard. I think it's, for those that do it in remote areas, high marks to them for doing that. In Burnaby, in Vancouver area, we're lucky we don't have to do that. And I suggest that most young, inexperienced therapists surround themselves with good therapists. So I wouldn't say I wouldn't say I envisioned myself where I am when I was 19 years old, but I definitely envisioned myself when I was in physio school, owning my own practice and running my own practice. And I got some abuse from it from some of my profs at the time when I would say that, because at the time not a lot of clinicians were working in private practice. But I knew that I was going to end up owning my own clinic or working in a clinic and not in a hospital. But I think the experiences that I had as a student in a hospital were very worthwhile. We've had incidences where in the clinic where somebody's had an epileptic seizure. We've had people pass out. We've had people have heart problems in the clinic. And we have to be able to realize that they're actually having some medical problem. It helps when I travel internationally with teams, because you're the person. Very rarely do we bring a doctor with us. So those experiences are useful, and they're needed, and the training on that is needed. No, I don't think so. I think a lot of people think that because I went into physio later. I already had a master's degree when I went into physiotherapy, and I'd already worked for 4 or 5 years with the soccer team. And a lot of people think I should have gone into physio, right out of my undergrad. But I don't think I would have had the experiences as a coach. I would have had that, and I don't think I would have had the people skills back then, maybe. So no, I don't think I would have done anything different. What was really useful is in my undergrad degree, I took a business second major in business, and that was like the best thing I've ever done. And I recommend to most students, and I've asked the school at UBC to start having all their students take a couple of business courses, 1 or 2, or especially now where most therapists are going into private practice. Not everybody, but even if you're just going to work like in a hospital or institution, I think getting a business background is not going to hurt you. And I think having that background when I went through my undergrad is one of the best things that ever happened. I didn't do it on purpose because I didn't know at that time I was going to be a physio, but I think in hindsight, definitely one of the best things I did. The biggest thing that has helped me through my life, I think, is the business program that I took, and my wife. And you don't necessarily have to have a spouse, but you definitely have to have support around you. So without that support, I would not be able to travel as much as I've traveled. She's been home a lot more than I have, looking after the girls. We now are lucky enough that we travel together, and so we'll cycle to Europe, or we'll travel to a major event like in Rio when I went to the Pan American Games. I was able to do the games and then fly my family down and spend some time. So we've been doing that a lot. I did the same thing at the 2012 Olympics. So we do that a lot. We do things either before major games or after as a family. But for sure, she has been the guiding rock.